Yes.
Well, I mean, no, it's definitely not the best movie ever, but it has some good points.
That movie is based on the book of Enoch or Enosh in ancient Jewish times.
But,
Who knows?
Yeah, but to reinforce Dennis's idea here, you know, there's things that are appropriate for humans to eat, which are fruits and vegetables, and there are things that are not. They are living, moving, you know, noise-making creatures.
Noise-making.
But those are for God. And so, you know, with doing this, you could, just another possibility is Cain is kind of equating God to humans. He's lowering him down to that level where he's feeding, he's serving things that are for humans, not for divine beings.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hebrews 11 verse 4 says, by faith Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. Now, in my schooling, I've always been taught that when it says by faith Abel offered a more excellent sacrifice, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. I'm of the persuasion that God actually told Abel and Cain what kind of sacrifice to offer. Abel obeyed, Cain did not. So it wasn't so much that God favored one personality over another personality. It was that God respected the obedience of Abel over Cain.
Thank you. It's a good viewpoint. But something else more is going on besides just as I gaze upon you, I gaze upon you. Could it be a test? Could it be a test for the firstborn Cain? Because Cain is the firstborn, and in ancient culture, the firstborn is the heir and the successor. But God shows Abel, the little brother, favor. So Cain gets angry, and what's it say? At least in the NIV, it says his face was downcast, which is dejected, crushed, miserable. And then you read verse 6 and 7, and it's the Lord talking to Cain. And this is what it says. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? Okay? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door, and it desires to have you, but you must master it. Now, Cain doesn't say anything to what God tells him. He goes on, he commits the murder of his brother Abel. And it's a typical Hebrew Bible. Super dense, kind of riddle-like. But look again at verse 7. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? Okay? There's a couple of ways that you can read that. The response itself is a little bit of a riddle. Cain brings a good offering. He wasn't accepted, even though he did nothing wrong. And then God turns around and says, if you do what is right, you will be accepted. So if you're Cain, you're going, see what I'm getting at? So the puzzle is, you've gazed upon my little brother. Will you eventually gaze upon me? If you exalt my little brother, will you exalt me eventually? And God, the way I read this, is saying the following. I gave my attention to your little brother. He offered the firstborn and the fat, and there's some narrative hints here to the dynamics about that. So my attention went to him first. But if you do good, won't you be accepted? So now, Cain is forced with a choice. He's given a test. Whether he will do good or not do good. So the vocabulary of the whole thing here is setting up this test of Cain's as an analogy or a parallel to who? Mom and Dad. Okay? Really, it's turning into the same story. When they had a test, you're going to do good, you're not going to do good at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, God's response, if you do good, can you read it like this? I know you did good, and I know it doesn't feel like you've been exalted, but you will be. There's enough generosity of mine to go around. It just didn't go to you first. I know it feels unfair. You're the firstborn. But that's not the way I work, says God. The way I work can be trusted. And there's enough of my generosity for everyone. Now, if Cain is doubting God's extension of his generosity, also, same doubt that the snake or the serpent was trying to introduce to Mom and Dad. For instance, what did the snake say? Did God really say? No, you won't actually die. God has so much more to give you. He's just holding out on you. But the question then to the serpent is, does that mean he's never going to give more? Because here's the truth, and the serpent was telling a little bit of truth. You know, what's the best lie? It's got a little truth in it, right? Humans were told you need to rule and subdue, correct? And that's for all of us up to date. Okay. What's one thing you need to know if you're going to rule and subdue? You need to know the difference between good and evil, right, in the first place? That's like job number one, if you're going to make a good decision. So how are you going to get it? How in the world are you going to get it if God says, don't eat that tree, then you're going to know the difference between good and evil? But go out and rule and subdue. Okay? Well, look at it this way. Do you take it, or do you wait to receive it? What did Adam and Eve do? What was Cain angry about? Can you trust God's faith? Can you trust God's, or have faith in God's method and timing of his generosity? In other words, just like Mom and Dad, whose voice are you listening to? What's our own method of getting things? Do we wait for God to give it to us? Or do we say, we want it right now, and we want it when we want it? Don't even necessarily need it, right? Just want it. And God said, nope. I have a much different way of doing things. I have a different timetable. But if you do good, you will be exalted.
So, Greg, I can't imagine what it would be like to talk to God or have God talk to me. Okay?
I can't either.
And especially in this context of being just starting the human race, right? But the passage 6 and 7 implies that you knew what was right and you didn't do it. Now, is that the actual offering, or is that the actual attitude, or is that both of them?
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of all of that in there, but they knew what to do and didn't do it. And so now, God comes and says, you knew what to do, but you didn't do it. That's why ostensibly that's why you're downcast, right?
Yeah.
Then, so what does he do? He immediately goes and does something even worse. Okay? Even worse. And I think, so what is the message to us? I'm never going to talk to God that way. Okay? I have prayer, but It ain't like he's talking back to me in some way that I understand it directly and verbally. But I need to understand what God has said to me through his holy scripture and do that. And if I'm doing something that is wrong, I don't get mad at the person that told me it was wrong, the person that's doing it good or right, or even God. The message is, if you don't, and there's lots of other passages that would support this, if you don't put goodness in your life, evil will creep in. And so I think, there's sort of that message here is that, Cain did something that was wrong. God talked to him about it, and he went out and did something even more wrong because he actually tried to hide from this one, right? He actually said, I don't know what's going on there. Talk to somebody
just like
else.
Mom and Dad.
Yeah, see Mom and Dad. They
See
know
Mom and Dad all throughout this.
Right. They know what that evil little boy's doing. So I think when we look at what is there for us, and is that and here's where I thought you were going with that grace or issue of God. God did not damn him to any kind of torture or any kind of exile or anything else. He pointed out that you did something wrong. Okay? Wow. That we all kind of fall into that category at times, right?
Yep.
And so that's, in my mind, that is the real meat of what to take away in our lives today is, we need to always look for what God is telling us to do. He's telling us to do that because it's good for us, not necessarily because he needs it.
Yep. That's one that I'll come to. That's one of the takeaways, and there's some other takeaways too. I'm sure I didn't skip anything.
Greg, I just had a thought while Greg was talking. In every instance, and even today, with Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, all throughout history, it's not like they didn't know better, or they didn't know what to do. God gives a warning. He says, do not do X, or this will be the consequence.
Yeah.
God comes to Cain when Cain's all down the dumps. He comes to him and he says, if you refuse to do what's right, then watch out. Sin is crouching out the door, eager to control you. He warns him, do not go there. Because he knows his heart. He knows what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Adam and Eve had a warning. Do not eat of that tree. That one, just that one. Don't touch it. Cain the same way. Don't give in, Cain, because sin is crouching at your door. So I would say, even though we're tempted, and this whole class is about temptation, it's not just blind temptation. It's not like we didn't know. It's like, oops, yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, you do. You do know that, because God has said, do not do this, or this is going to happen. And that's been the case all throughout history.
You notice too, Cain's anger isn't seen as sin until he acts upon it. And then Christ in the Sermon on the Mount talks about don't even be angry. With further study, that's murderous rage angry.
I think the second half of verse 7 says, you must rule over it.
Right.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. We'll just repeat each other. Go for it.
If you must, God gave you the ability.
Yeah.
You chose not to use that ability. You must.
As we've been discussing this, I've been trying to figure this out. So, the opposite of this, a good example of the opposite of what happened with Cain is Jesus in the garden. Jesus had to have been tempted not to get crucified. Because It doesn't explicitly say that, but he asked God to take it away.
Yeah,
So
really.
he must have been being tempted, pushed to not do it. He didn't want to. He overcame. He conquered. So this is the exact opposite of what Cain did.
Yep. God, Cain, you're assuming there's no exaltation for you just because I went to your little brother first. Now you have a choice. You're going to do good, you're not going to do good based on this moment right here. Because be careful. You need to be careful now, Cain, because there is an animal at the door. Sin, it's a croucher. It's crouching, seen as an animal. And it wants you. It desires you. That is a intense word. It will eat you up. And just like I told your mom and dad, rule these animals. But what did they do? They let an animal rule them. Same choice. Now you've got one inside you that wants you. You can rule it. Be careful. Because if you don't, it will get you. Now we know how the story ends, right? The croucher wins, or he rules Cain. Cain goes out into the field where the snake crawled in from, because in a lot of translations, when it's talking about the serpent, the snake, something like the smartest one in the field. And he kills his brother. But you know what? In spite of this, what does God do? He shows him mercy. Just like he showed his mom and dad mercy. He told his mom and dad, don't eat or you're going to die. Well, they didn't die. They were exiled to a realm of death. Adam ends up living like 8 centuries. And in the same way, Cain murders. He's a murderer. And everywhere else in the Torah, what do you do to a murderer? What do you do to him? You kill him. God doesn't kill him. God exiles him from the land of Eden and shows him mercy. How does he show him mercy? If we read further along, you'll find it.
Make sure that nobody would kill him because he gave him a sign.
Yeah, set some type of mark on him, and something like 7 times over.
If someone killed him, they would be punished.
Yeah. But the mark, the mercy, is to protect him. And to protect him from anyone who would want to kill him. That's another rabbit hole. Who wants to kill him? We're not going down there. But obviously something was going on outside the garden. But anyway, forget it. You know, in many ways, Cain's story is humanity's story. So, Denise, what happens when we don't get what we think we deserve?
Well, things can build up inside, and so I'll think of an example of me at work.
Okay.
So if I feel I deserve something and somebody else gets it, if I think about it and dwell about it, I can get mad at my boss and also the other person that receives it. But when I come in the presence of God and I discuss it to Him, here's the way it usually works out with me. I start telling God and complaining to God and like, you know, how could this happen? You know, how could you let this happen? Blah, 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 blah. And then the longer I talk and the more I reason and the more I am in the true presence of God, I feel, then, you know, it's like I work myself through it, through God's Word, thinking, okay, all sin deserves death. So what I deserve truly is death. And you've had mercy on me. And thank you that you did not give me what I deserved in the first place.
Yeah.
So, okay, You got this under the control. I'm not seeing it, but I trust you.
Excellent, excellent. I think that's where we need to be. And like you were saying initially, when we don't get what we think we deserve, what do? We plot. We want to take it, want to get revenge or something like that. Now with that in mind, which is universal, I think there's not a person in here who hasn't felt that way. With that in mind, is there any way that you can sympathize or empathize with Cain? Yes or no?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Because number one, it's hard to be in a place in your life when God's face doesn't seem to be shining upon you. It doesn't seem to be gazing on you. Right? That's a hard place to be. Number two, it's also hard to see others succeed and you fail, especially when you've done nothing wrong. You agree with that? Anybody been there before? Anybody not been there? Raise your hand. You know, some of us have it very, very, very hard. Every day is a struggle. It's bad. And God's favor seems far away. His gaze seems far away. And you think about verses like 1 John 3, 10 through 12, which is just really kind of scary. It refers back to Genesis 3:15. There will always be enmity between your seed, serpent, and the woman's seed. And you think the devil's going to have offspring? Yes. And you find out in 1 John 3, 10 through 12 who they are, and that Cain was one. Even though he was a seed of the woman, he was also a snake. And then, so we're faced with these situations where God's face doesn't seem to be shining on us, and that life is bad, it's hard, and it's just like God's not ever going to show us favor. Okay, but Jesus Christ walked around and he said things like, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, blessed are you if you hunger and thirst for things to be put right. And he also said something like, if you know my Father, and if you know what he's up to in this world, that's the most fortunate and blessed place that you can ever be. And my generosity can meet you there too. So when you're faced with these situations that Cain was faced with, I didn't get what I deserve. I want to take it. What are you going to do? Are you going to slip back and be a snake, a baby snake? Are you going to be a child of God? What are you going to do? That's what he asked Cain. Be careful. What are you going to do? He asked the same question to us. And we can jump back and forth because we're all snakes at times. Right? You agree with that? Everybody in here been a snake before? Okay. Yes?
You asked the question if we could see, if we had empathy for Cain.
Yep.
In what regard are you asking us if we had empathy?
Because he didn't do anything wrong with his sacrifice.
Okay.
Other guys might have been better, but he didn't do a thing wrong.
I have no empathy for him for killing his brother.
I didn't, yeah.
I have no empathy
What
for
led
him.
up? I'm sorry, I asked the question wrong. What led up to killing him?
I have no empathy for him losing his consummate or his ability to be able to stop himself. The idea, though, because God never said you're wrong. God tried to help him through his emotions.
Uh-huh. He
God
did.
spoke to him directly.
Yeah. Like Gary,
I don't
couldn't-
get, like
I don't
Gary
get
said,
that.
I don't get God to speak to me directly. Okay? So the idea, though, is if God spoke to me directly, I doubt I'd do it. I mean, I won't kill a person right now. and God hasn't ever spoke to me. I don't see, and you know what, it might go back to, I don't really possess empathy very well. I have a hard time empathizing with people. The idea, though, is that he had every chance could take. Yes, he should be punished, period. And that's the way it is. And plus, God's merciful.
The way I empathize with, I think what you're getting at is, when I was a kid, first time I went out for a baseball team, Little League baseball team, I went out there with all these other kids. I did my best to do what I was told. I'm sure I didn't do everything I was told, but I did not make the team. And I was crushed, and I was mad, and I was probably did some things that I probably should have gotten a whipping for, you know, as a result of that. But I had done nothing wrong. I had gone out there and done just like all the other kids and showed what I could do playing the parts of the game. So, you know, that was childish. I was a child, a little kid.
Yeah.
And Cain was being a child. He was acting childish, but he was hurt. He was mad. He was upset. He was looking to blame, get even. And we've all been through that, I think. And now as an adult, I realize, yeah, you know, the coaches picking the team, they just wanted to get a group that could win the season. That's all. And I wasn't one of those. So because it's my first time to play, you know. So that, yeah, I can empathize in that respect. Yeah.
So Greg, I mean, empathizing with Cain, verses 6 and 7, to my mind, make it clear he did something that he knew was wrong. Because God says, if you do what is right, I mean, the way he said it, it's sort of like, it's a question, right? Well, you will be accepted if you don't do what's wrong, or the other way, whatever he said it, it was that way. So it applies very heavily to me that whether it was the wrong stuff or the wrong attitude or whatever, and we know his attitude was horrible, right? It shows itself. I think the same thing's today.
Yeah.
We don't just, I was in a discussion the other day, we just don't stumble into sin and not know about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, what I just did was a sin.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That rarely happens.
You listened to the wrong voices.
Right. And so I think we can show great empathy for that, because we engage in sin knowingly almost all the time.
Yeah.
Okay? He engaged in what we would call sin knowingly. That's there's the real, I mean, for me, that's the real parallel right there.
And he may have been trying to rationalize it.
Oh, I'm sure.
But in his mind, he did something wrong.
You might do
And
that, I don't know.
well, I mean, it's like, you know, I don't think we like to be told we're wrong. I think that's bottom line with him. God said, you know, something about this sacrifice is not right. I'm not showing favor to you. So instead of saying, oh, that's my bad, let me go back and see how I can fix that, he just got mad and went and killed his brother and then lied about it. And, you know, it's just this whole, you know, impulsivity apparently is not a new thing to this generation, you know. But I mean, I agree. When you know, most of the time, 99% of the time, you know when you're doing wrong.
Oh, yeah.
But to go back and say, well, I didn't know that, I mean, that's what I hear from my 8th graders. Come on. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
Part of what you said, Dennis, there's people walking this earth right now. It doesn't matter if God came and sat down by them and they had a conversation. They will not do what he asked them to do. It doesn't matter. But, yeah, okay. So that's Cain and Abel. Next week is the temptation of Christ. And happy Easter.
I'll sit here until you get back. I think it's open right now. Shouldn't be long until later. Well, you're back in Ohio again? Finally, yes.
Thank you much. And I'll get my $41. Honestly,
So I have a flat fee of $30 for every signature. So when you get that, it's a lot.
honestly, I would have said, forget